Hello, and welcome to the Bitcoin Roundup podcast presented by Coinbits. We bring Bitcoin news, hot topics of conversation, and deep dives into a variety of Bitcoin topics to you weekly. We are Coinbits, a Bitcoin financial services company. Check us out at coinbits.app. This recording is for informational purposes only. No investment or legal or any other advice should be drawn from this content. And as always, consult an advisor before making any legal or financial decisions.
So let's get started. This is Coinbits. We get together, we talk about whatever topic we want to. It's a bunch of Bitcoiners hanging out. I'm glad that you guys joined us today. Just a quick intro on Coinbits to make sure that it's clear to everybody. We are a Bitcoin financial services company. The purpose of these sessions is to come together, talk about Bitcoin events and general happenings in Bitcoin. We'd love to have your input. So anybody who is in the listeners, you're welcome to come up at any time, just request to speak. So for tonight is Bitcoin maximalism. Bitcoin maximalism has gotten to be quite a hot topic the past few days, with people lashing out, and it's kind of typical behavior, I think, in bear markets. And yeah, so we wanted to talk about Bitcoin maximalism and kind of generally, is it good, is it bad, what is it? So the first topic that I'll bring up here, and any people that are speakers, you're welcome to jump in with your thoughts, is how do we define as a community what Bitcoin maximalism is?
Well, I just spoke about this on a show called Shitcoin Insider with Guy Swan, and it hasn't been published yet, but it should be published this week. To me, obviously, I mean, the word Bitcoin maximalist started out as an insult against people who identified as Bitcoin only from Vitalik Buterin when they were some of the bad side effects of the first. And I guess, Bitcoiners just ran with it. Like, okay, fine, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Whatever. That's what you want to call me. It's not necessarily offensive to think that I think Bitcoin is so great. You want to call me by that name, fine, okay. But what is a Bitcoin maximalist now? Because now you have people like Udi talking about how, anybody who owns Bitcoin is a Bitcoiner, okay. So then is a Bitcoiner Bitcoin maximalist? Obviously, I don't think so. So what is specifically a Bitcoin maximalist, if not just a Bitcoiner? Because to me, it is just a Bitcoiner. But a Bitcoiner is not just somebody who holds Bitcoin. I mean, you can say that. But a Bitcoiner is somebody who understands the value of Bitcoin. Understand that value. They understand why certain things are also not valuable. If you understand the actual value of Bitcoin, that implies a lot. And because of that, you're probably going to have it, and you're probably not going to have anything that's not valuable for the same reason.
That's really well put. You're right. Not every Bitcoiner is a Bitcoin maximalist, and it's about the values that Bitcoin stands for. And it's an interesting thing that Bitcoiners do, where we take what is meant to be an insult and turn it into we wear it with honor, right? It's a badge. And that's a really pertinent take, is how do we, so is there, the next topic is, so let's say we go with that definition of Bitcoin max. Does everything in the world relative to Bitcoin dwindle in its ability to be maximized, right? Because there's, taking the absolute purist point of view on this, right? If we're right, we are right. If we're right about Bitcoin and its potential for the world, there is literally nothing else that is ever going to be as valuable to the world as Bitcoin. And it's so, the term maximalist in that sense doesn't do it justice, right? It's Bitcoin only, right? It's what it really means.
Yeah, I mean, and so, do I think like my car is a scam, or, should I not buy a car? And some people would say, that maybe you shouldn't buy a car. And if they were saying I shouldn't buy a car because Bitcoin is a better investment than a car, then they're right. But the thing is that I didn't buy my car as an investment. I bought my car because I wanted to be able to drive around in a cool car and go places, and it's fun. So life isn't all about Bitcoin. But that being said, why would I buy something like the Litecoin, for example? There's better examples than Litecoin, but why would I buy Litecoin? What am I going to do with it that I can't do better with Bitcoin? So I wouldn't buy Litecoin. The only reason why people tend to buy things like Litecoin is because they're looking for an investment of some sort. And just like the car, if you're going to buy this thing as an investment instead of Bitcoin, it's probably a bad idea.
Yeah, very good. You bring up really good points. I think that point of utility versus saving or versus investment is the real crux of the matter. There is no better investment than Bitcoin, and I think even some altcoiners would agree. The problem is we have no way in the world right now of saving. And because we don't have a way of saving, until that's fixed, everything else is downstream from that. We don't have the money. We don't. We have melting ice cube that is fiat currency that is, melting at an ever expanding rate. And so because of that, we're not able to actually save. We're not actually, and then so therefore, like, the utility of half the things that we buy ends up being an investment because we're looking for a substitute of that main thing. And I think people who understand this, people that can turn that flip in their head where they are able to understand, because we can't save, everything becomes a saving vehicle. Therefore, until that's fixed, nothing else in the world is going to get fixed. And then we can't really derive utility. Like the utility argument, I think, is really interesting because you don't have utility for something. You don't have its absolute utility for it because you're not able to use it only as utility. Even cars, to some extent, and we saw what happened in the wake of COVID, right? Where used cars, turn into a store of value in some sense. There's some cars, especially some specialty cars like trucks and work vehicles. Those were going, the used cars were in some cases more expensive than new vehicles, just because the delivery date was going to be months and maybe even years out. So because we don't have pure utility of things that are useful, that are purely a utility, we don't have a way to save. And so we don't have saving, we don't have utility. And until that's, to me, in my mind, that's what maximalism is. We realize it. Until that's fixed, nothing else is an investment. Nothing else can be fixed. And that is a key part of the definition of a maximalist. Samson, welcome.
Hey guys.
We're just going over. Thank you for joining, man. Appreciate you coming on. We were just going over defining what Bitcoin maximalism is so that we can have a discussion around, is it good, is it bad, the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't know if I've ever heard you, and you probably have spoken to this many times, but we don't know if we've ever heard you define maximalism in your own terms. What are your thoughts on that?
I generally just, my maximalism is common sense. I don't really try to define it because it's not really, I don't know, it's not really a thing. It was originally a slur from Vitalik to insult Bitcoiners. And, we kind of adopted it over time, but it's not really well defined because its origin is just an insult and trying to force inclusiveness of shitcoins onto Bitcoiners. So it's difficult to define. And then there's different flavors of Bitcoin maximalism too, right? You can just be Bitcoin only, or you can be toxic. And yeah, it's a pretty big range of things that you could put in there.
Good point. Is there a better word? Like if it words for Vitalik, kind of, steering this conversation and giving us this wonderful term that we now all wear proudly. Is there a better way to describe what you just described? Like, is Bitcoin common sense is a bit of a mouthful. Would it be like a Bitcoin purist, a Bitcoin absolutist? Is there a better way to describe what we just talked about? The people that prescribe to that ideology.
Well, I think it's always going to mean different things for different people, and it's open to interpretation too, because there's a big group of Bitcoiners and from all walks of life with different perspectives. So I don't think you're going to get a perfect definition. Like I'm often called a Bitcoin maximalist, but I have no problem with stablecoins. I think stablecoins are useful, and I think it helps us get to hyper-Bitcoinization. I think there's things out there that are not scams, and unfortunately there's like very few of them, but other Bitcoins would disagree with me there and say everything but Bitcoin's a scam. So it's really tricky to define.
I think it comes down to.
Well, I was going to say, I think the word Bitcoiner is it. If you are a Bitcoiner, then you understand Bitcoin's value, why that's important, why it's valuable to you, and as such, like, you're going to act in such a manner that reflects that. And Samson wasn't here when I spoke about this before, but if you understand Bitcoin's value, you're very unlikely to also love shitcoins. I mean, I don't see they're kind of like opposing views. If you understand, if you're in real estate, and I got this example from Lamar Wilson and I love it. if you're in real estate and you really understand the markets well, and somebody, is trying to sell houses to people that don't know a lot about real estate, and you know that those houses have none of the fundamental properties that make houses typically valuable in the real estate market, none of them. They are just trash, and the guy is treating them like normal houses that are worth what a good house would be worth, or what a good property would be worth. As a person that knows the market, a person that knows house properties, whatever, that these are bad investments. You might even call them scams. The other people don't, and I think that's kind of what's happening here. Like, if you understand Bitcoin, then you automatically know that the other coins just don't have those properties. If something did have all the properties, then fine. To me, it's not about being Bitcoin only, even though that's the end result of it. It's more about just, no, even if Bitcoin didn't exist, I still wouldn't be interested in all the scams that are out there, because they are fundamentally bad. And I know enough to understand that.
Yeah, that's a good point. The thing too is those scams only exist because of Bitcoin, right? Most of them are affinity scams or piggybacking off of Bitcoin or blockchain technology in some way. So I think that's another dimension to it, that we're adverse to those things and we abhor them because they're diluting the value that Bitcoin brings to the world, and they're actively trying to use Bitcoin and everything around Bitcoin in some way to scam other people.
It's an affinity scam, just like in the real estate example. Houses with no fundamental value, no value on a market for people that actually understand real estate, and yet they're being sold as real estate investments.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember too that when Vitalik said it, and I know that Samson illustrated this, is he said it as an insult, right? And there's that saying out there, like, you can't choose your nicknames, like they're given to you. And I think that's why the Bitcoin community has embraced this Bitcoin maximalism idea, because the adults in the room realize how trivial it is, and how all Vitalik was trying to do was change the narrative and try to create more value from Ethereum, because he realizes that the louder the Bitcoiners get, the less attention he has on his protocol, which we all know is not even close to the same standard and superiority as the Bitcoin network is.
And I just want to add, it's also, the irony isn't lost on me that, and I saw it, it's not my idea, I saw it on Twitter recently, and I can't remember who said this, but we just went through all of these scams unwinding, and all of these shit coins just coming apart, people losing their savings, companies who were not allowing Bitcoin to be withdrawn, and somehow the Bitcoiners are painted with some sort of blame for being toxic and maximalist. It's a misdirection, and it's very, I guess I would say it's strange, except at this point it's pretty much accepted that this is the type of thing that's acceptable on the internet. But you just have all this finger pointing, and perhaps the only group that doesn't deserve it is the Bitcoin maximalists, and they're somehow painted with this brush. It's very frustrating.
I do think, though, I think maybe Vitalik, what he did served its purpose, because it almost brought everybody else to the table by saying, if you're a Bitcoin maxi, then there's actually other stuff to actually focus on or worry about. So are you a Bitcoin maxi, or it kind of like brought them into relevancy? And at Coinbits, we had a team member, I won't dox him here, but someone at the Bitcoin conference in Miami came up to him, and she was like a YouTube crypto girl or something, and said, "Are you a maxi?" And he didn't really know what to say. He said, I don't know if the shoe fits. And I think a lot of that, he kind of wanted to say, like, really think about other shit coins. If I have to, if they become relevant and serve the purpose that I think Bitcoin serves, then yes, I'll give them the time of day. But right now, I mean, Bitcoin is all that I care about, all that I need. And it's doing exactly what we all came out here for, to back it to do.
Hey, I want to make a quick introduction. This is Mike from Mighty Disrupt. I'm founder. Listening to, this topic it's really, really important to note that, maximalism is an adjective, and as people, use it for good and bad terms, and belittling people that believe in Bitcoin, like ourselves and many of you, it really is something to consider, where we all come into the space from different walks of life, and how we getting into learning about Bitcoin with the, different, surrounding influences. For example, like, I got into mining before I fully understood Bitcoin from a business perspective. And over time, as you learn Bitcoin. Because I mean, the learning curve for anyone, any newbie that comes into this space, it takes a lot of learning, a lot of like reading, a lot of influencing, a lot of research, a lot of your own intuitions to know that, volatility is part of this. And that's what scares a lot of people off. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a religion, in my opinion. I think it's something that you grow into thinking long term that this is an architecture of an asset class that, had you not learned it in your own right, through your own channel, through your own business, through your own vehicle of discovery, maximalism is just an adjective. But the bigger picture or the question is, where are you in relation to understanding Bitcoin? Is it something that benefits you? And in maximalism, I see it used in both contexts, good and bad. Just wanted to mention.
So I've seen that. So first, I disagree with the Bitcoin is religion thing. I've seen that thrown out there quite a few times, and I've seen articles penned like saying we're just cult. I think if we let that propagate, then it's going to be used against Bitcoiners, just like maximalism is still used as an insult, like you're closed-minded and whatever. I don't think Bitcoin is religion. Bitcoin is a distillation of logic, right? You can achieve it. You can reach the understanding of why Bitcoin through reasoning through first principles. So there's nothing religious about it. It's just really basic deductions and logical thought, thinking what money needs to be and how it should work and how it needs to function, and you reach the logical conclusion of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree with Samson. Like, I think it's like a base layer that humanity can agree on, right? So if we can all agree on Bitcoin is just proof of work, and Bitcoin is the blockchain that has like expelled the most energy, right? So it's the longest going blockchain. So even if you copy the exact same code, the energy is just not going to be there in that second code, right? So like we can all agree, like if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, we can agree that Bitcoin is what is going to be the base layer for humanity, right? And that's the way I look at it, at least.
Yeah, I would say the only commonality with religion is there's a sense of purity. Like there's a purity in the mathematics and the design of Bitcoin and what we're trying to achieve with it. And I think in religion you're searching for the same thing, but that's about all the commonality there is.
Yeah,
it's not.
I do agree.
Like we
I
have
agree
faith
with
and
There's a little bit
we
more
believe
hope
in it.
when you imply religion. There's a little bit more hope, right? Where it's like a little bit more
Yeah.
proven, like.
Well, I
Well,
think that I
I
think
would.
these are very valid points, and I'd add to that. What was just said was that basically each one of us believes differently in different things, right? So we all represent our ideas by supporting what we believe in. If we support Bitcoin, we push it and we talk about it and we instill lectures and tutorials by just our means of talking about it and defending it. Now, there's another component to this that, the awareness of Bitcoin has gone through the roof, but a lot of people still, they say, yeah, I'm a maximalist. I'm supporting Bitcoin 100%. It's my lifestyle. It's everything I do. I eat, I breathe it. But some of these, influencers and whatnot that are talking about this never mined in their lives. They never touched a machine. They never plugged in a miner. They never appreciated that aspect of it. And, to go back to how Bitcoin was created and that it was first mined to create the first Bitcoin goes a long way to, talk further about this topic. And I think it has a lot of depth to, discussing this as a religion and as a business.
Mike, that's spot on. I appreciate you jumping in here and sharing your perspective. I want to just make sure that I give everybody who wants to speak a chance. So I'm gonna move you down to the listeners now, if you don't mind. But yeah, no, I mean, I think one key point here that we that Samson brought up that we kind of glossed over was this idea of people, right? People are the ones that ultimately Bitcoin is social consensus beyond the code, right? What keeps Bitcoin going is social consensus. And we tend to, and because it's social consensus, we tend to sometimes, use adjectives, I think, as Mike was saying, to go beyond the meaning of the word, and then it means different things to different people. But it ultimately is about the people in a way, and about what people believe. And so the biggest issue, I think, with not having, so you could examine an idea by the opposite of its existence. So if we don't have maximalism, right? If we don't have people defending the truth no matter what it takes. At sometimes there are personal relationships that get lost and at their own expense. And, we see people getting, getting sued for speaking the truth, right? Like Peter McCormick, for example. And so if we don't have that, if we don't have people who will speak the truth and who will defend it at all costs, we have then a bunch of people who are learning about the space, and then they lose a bunch of money, they lose their life savings, as we see in the wake of Celsius and Voyager and BlockFi and all those organizations that went belly up. And so the absence of maximalism is a more scary state, and I think even some altcoiners would agree, for the general, the general public learning about the space. But yeah, Coin for Kiddos, you've had your hand up. Thank you for being patient. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, kind of the people that are typically deemed as Bitcoin maximalists tend to be the educators in the space, right? The ones who are out there spreading the word about Bitcoin and the benefits of it. And those tend to be the people that the altcoiners or the shitcoiners don't really like speaking the benefits of Bitcoin. And so I would say as an educator and an outspoken person in the Bitcoin community, those are the ones who tend to be focused on, because they're the ones whose voices are being listened to. And in that respect, get deemed this Bitcoin maximalist, title. And so, it's kind of a shame, but at the same time, on the religious thing, I agree with Samson. I don't really think Bitcoin's a religion, but in the sense where people who have learned about Bitcoin and who understand it more and want to talk about it and help others learn about it, they go out into the world, much like apostles did, and speak the word of Bitcoin wherever they are and help other people understand the benefits of it. So in that respect, it is growing around the world, much like a religion would grow in its adoption phase.
Yeah, I wouldn't use
Can
that. I
I?
would say it's more like discovered math, and we're going around teaching people about numbers and the concept of zero and arithmetic and division.
And
That's probably a better analogy than
Yeah.
I definitely agree, but I do think there is a parallel with religion, not necessarily just religion, but any principled group in this sense. If you're a Bitcoiner, if you understand Bitcoin, why it's valuable, you become a part of the consensus. So, if for somehow Bitcoin became dominated by users who didn't actually understand what it was, well, that wouldn't be very good for Bitcoin, because ultimately users do decide what Bitcoin is at the end of the day. And so it's important that people understand what Bitcoin really is and kind of enforce that in order for Bitcoin to matter too.
I think you guys touched on a couple times the key word, which is truth. And I think that's where it gets interpreted by people outside of Bitcoin as like this religious fervor. I see it much more as Bitcoiners, once they actually understand Bitcoin enough, they realize the importance of verifiability, which is a form of truth. And that this is a common thread through everything in Bitcoin, is that you want to know what you're looking at is true. This also creates a total divide between Bitcoin and everything else that's crypto, because overwhelmingly, if not entirely, there's so much misrepresentation, if not just real misunderstanding about what is real on these other blockchains and what they actually do. And it feels like the whole basis of the community driven growth of all this other shitcoinery is really based on misunderstandings, misrepresentations, and a lot of times total fraud. So there's a stark contrast there. And I think once people really realize, as far as technology wise and a monetary system wise, we need something verifiable. We need something that's true, that's not just relying on trust. And I think that's where Bitcoin maximalism differs greatly from religion, because religion really, at the end of the day, is based more on faith, not like something verifiable.
TC, I totally agree with what you're saying, TC, and you kind of reminded me of something I heard today. Just in contrast, right? Where it's like the guy was telling me, yeah, when I was a kid, my mom would not let somebody else over unless she asked them, hey, do you go to church every Sunday? And then if they said no, then they wouldn't be allowed over. Now, obviously, this is just that's one thing, but it's kind of like I hear that resonating as like, hey, was he a Bitcoiner? You know what I mean? Like, is that guy a Bitcoiner? If he is, then I would want to I'd be more open to getting to know him. You know what I mean? Like,
Do you know the difference between right and wrong is what it is in that context. And that's where, like,
Yes.
I've said before, like, and I'm not the first to say this, but like, there's like a moral imperative around the truth and veracity of Bitcoin in contrast with just moral peril up in
it
town
reminds
with all
me.
the shit coining.
Well, it reminds me of, like, like my father. He still does handshake deals. You know what I mean? And like, to me, I'm like, you're fucking like, what? But that's just how he operates. And I think Bitcoin is taking us back to that kind of a standard, and then people might think, oh, that's a religious thing or whatever. But no, I think humans used to operate like, even like, think about the samurais back in the day. Like, they would operate off of like being a good human being to their understanding, you know. And I think just Bitcoin's taking us back to that, maybe. And
I did a handshake deal yesterday.
hell yeah,
This
brother.
is
Yeah.
this is all absolutely true, and I think it kind of switch gears a little bit on the conversation. Why do you think, and I'd like to have Samson speak to this first, why do people, let's just broadly term them altcoiners or people in general, attack Bitcoin maximalists? And is there anything that Bitcoin maximalists are doing or that is worth attacking? Is it just a way to, is it essentially an affinity scam? Is it a way to get attention of people to here, Bitcoin bad, buy my shitcoin kind of thing?
Kind of. Are you referring to the antima or the anti-max?
That is hilarious. By the way.
I need an Antima shirt.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm just
this
catching
is-
wind of that. I'm just catching wind of that. So it's like, what? Like, oh, this is hilarious.
yeah, I mean, there's nothing new about that. It's all like this. I would say, like, Vitalik's like the genesis of that, right? The coining of the term maximalist is just to dismiss people that just want Bitcoin and nothing else. And all the Udis and Erics and now Matt Corallo, like, these guys, they all have a motivation. But if you look at why Matt is doing it now, you can kind of follow the money and see the connection to A16Z and their involvement in the shitcoin space. So there is a reason everyone does this stuff, right? Either they're bought and paid for, or they're trying to get clout, or they're trying to affinity scam, or they're just trying to scam people. But at the end of the day, it's like nothing good can come out of the Antima movement and all of that stuff. I think it's just wasting our time. And I've been thinking, like, why are they so angry and why are they so voracious recently? And I think it's really because Bitcoin maximalism, if you understand, like, if you agree with me that it's common sense, then it is an equilibrium state. If I go to Giacomo and I say, buy this governance token for some DeFi trading platform I built, he'll say, no, I don't want that. I only want Bitcoin, right? It's the equilibrium. Like, he doesn't need to do anything. He just rejects it outright because he thinks it's stupid. If I go to, I don't know, who else is a maximalist? If I go to Safestein and I say, buy these soul-bound NFTs, he'll say, no, fuck you. Like, I don't want that. Get it on my face. It's stupid. So there's no need for any expenditure of energy. It's just, we understand that a lot of this stuff is garbage or it's stupid, and we reject it. Now, the other side, the Antima guys like Udi and whatever, they have to constantly make noise and complain about how mean we are or uninclusive we are or us being toxic or whatever. If they stop talking, then that entire movement dies, right? There has to be an energy input there. So that's why they're trying to stir things up now. I think they've got some momentum and they need to keep it going. But that's not an equilibrium state. Like, scamming people takes energy. They have to input energy into doing that.
Yeah,
Very good.
I agree with everything you just said, Samson. I just wanted to add that I feel like they need to attack Bitcoin because it's almost like the lever point for their whole marketing. It's like, if you don't point to Bitcoin and point out in what ways you outperform it or improve upon it or make it irrelevant, you don't have a marketing pitch. These things are so abundant, and there's such a proliferation of all this bullshitting, and it's typically like, the context that they kind of have to keep going, because Bitcoin is like undoubtedly succeeding. They have to find a way to leverage that and put it down at the same time. They can't not talk about it because it's so relevant. So they're kind of like borrowing that relevance and using it as a springboard at the same time.
Yeah, pretty much. They have sort of an alliance going now. If you look at all the different factions that are really loud and noisy, one of them is Stacks. Then you have the edgy guys that are trying to, be edgy for the sake of clout and relevance. And then you have some of the shitcoiners that are like .eths or whatever, and they're trying to push this narrative and attack right now because it's ahead of the merge. And as we know, the merge is their next big pump, so they need to be aggressive at this time. Then you have like A16Z doing their thing and working their magic. But as a whole, like these guys all benefit from attacking Bitcoin and trying to portray Bitcoin in a certain light because it helps justify and normalize their scams. So it's this weird unholy alliance right now that seems to be gaining some traction, but I don't think it'll last.
And it's absolutely not an accident. I mean, we've been seeing, at least I have, and most people I talk to, Bitcoin maximalism as an idea, or I should just say the idea that Bitcoin is the real value and that there's not much value in most arbitrary tokens doing arbitrary things. That idea was never a big part of a new person's kind of entry into the space. It used to be that somebody would hear about Bitcoin, and if they were Bitcoin only, I'm talking maybe like 5 years ago, if they were Bitcoin only, it's only because they didn't know there was other things that existed. They just hear about Bitcoin barely and they get into Bitcoin. And then they hear about other things and they, on YouTube or whatever, and they probably didn't understand Bitcoin in the first place, so they might buy it. And then eventually they learn their lessons from there, and then they become Bitcoin only after they learn.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing new people get into the space who, and of course a lot of people will get in now for things like Doge and other, whatever Web3 stuff's going on that they hear and they think sounds exciting. But what's new is a massive wave of people who I'm meeting at meetups and at conferences and at events who are there for the first time, who've maybe been into Bitcoin for a month, and they've been reading the Bitcoin Standard, and they've been listening to Guy Swan, and they've been watching, Michael Saylor interviews, and they come 1 month into Bitcoin to the meetup already knowing a fuck ton about what Bitcoin is and why it matters. And they never shitcoined or cared. And even if they did, it was short-lived as they learned very quickly, and they come straight in as what would be called now a Bitcoin maximalist. That didn't used to happen before, and it's happening now as we're being told that Bitcoin maximalism is dying.
Yeah, it's accelerating. I thought too.
Okay, Connor, I am back.
The learning curve and the time to ramp up is actually decreasing. So I think this is why these guys are going at it like fast and attacking hard, because they know time is running out. You can't keep propagating these scams indefinitely. There's a finite shelf life for all of them.
Yeah, every day Bitcoin gives me more hope because of that reason right there. It's because of all out there, everybody that's in the community, man. Like the oscillation is getting lower. Like the waves are getting shallower and shallower. You know what I mean? And like it took me 3 years to understand what the hell Bitcoin was. And any pleb nowadays, it takes them like 6 months tops.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, one of the things about these shitcoins is every time someone becomes a maximalist, they're no longer a potential customer for these shitcoins to fill their bags with. So they're trying to create this wedge between keeping people becoming into Bitcoin because they lose a customer. If somebody shitcoins on whatever other shitcoin, they're still a customer. They're still flimsy. They don't really understand the technology. They don't really understand the monetary value and the benefits of Bitcoin, and they can be duped into giving them their money. But once they become a Bitcoin maximalist, they no longer are in that playing field. And so they're trying really hard to keep people from getting to that point.
I always believe that.
Sorry,
just real quick. I always believe that there's like a certain truth finding in yourself to like become a Bitcoin maximalist, because it just doesn't come out of nowhere. There are certain types of people that you can bombard with the information over and over again, but for some reason they haven't figured out how to even be true to themselves in their life and their lifestyle. And so it's really hard to get those people, like the sell lies are just too big. And then there's those people that, like Bitcoin maxis are a perfect example, what was given earlier with Saifedean. If you try to sell them like the NFT sneaker, you just be like, no. And that's, like people do that in everyday life with other things. And Bitcoin just happens to represent those people really well. I think the people that are like in their lives already, pretty much, understanding what they are willing to do, what they're not willing to do, being honest with themselves. Those people find Bitcoin faster. I do believe. I've seen it in my pool of friends that those adapt faster.
Well, I gotta add in there, like I think age definitely is under, right? Like a lot of these quote unquote smart people that think they can shitcoin are younger and they're definitely smart, And I live in the Bay Area, so I'm like meeting Google and Facebook engineers, stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, Celsius, blah blah blah, you can make a percent. I was like, no, bro, it's like it's the same old song. They just haven't been in the game long enough to understand that. And it just boggles my mind because these guys are pretty fucking smart people, But I think that the age, they always tend to be younger. I'm in my late 30s myself, and I have a child. I'm about to have another one on the way. So like my time, like my perception of time is different than them,
100%. Yeah. No, I mean, I do agree with that. I think also that, it doesn't help that in everyday life, as we walk through the world, we're getting bombarded with fiat mental crap, from like just the advertisement. If you look into research of that, of how much it upped over the years and how much it influences our brains. So I don't fault the younger generation, coming in and doing that. I think we have a responsibility there and actively educate them, like every situation I come into when I speak to people, and I came from a completely different side of like an understanding of money. Like I was raised in a family that never taught me anything about money. So I had to learn all of that by myself. But it's something where I feel like there's like this in the Bitcoin maxi space. I see a strong, and I've commented on this before, like on Twitter a lot, where I see, people shit posting. And then there's a real question along the shit posts, and there will be like 5 maxis jumping on this, answering with a real answer. And I really appreciate that about the community, because when I was new, I was so intimidated. And when I had a question, people would just straight up answer it. And that's why I stayed, So it's really cool.
Definitely.
Frida,
Go ahead, Joe.
that's a great point. And I just kind of look at it from the other angle of, when we think about Bitcoin Maxi, a lot of people associate that with this kind of toxic behavior. And I was trying to think, why is that? Or why maybe do Bitcoiners respond so aggressively to certain things? And if you really dissect why, at least in my opinion, I'd like to hear some others' views on this. It's not out of a sense of fear, in the sense of like someone's gonna outstrip Bitcoin's market cap, or like we're scared of another coin becoming king of crypto. Like there's no fear here. It's more just blocking out the noise, clearing out the distractions, and protecting people from getting scammed, like we've seen, the last 6 months at the beginning of this year. And it's kind of just a protection mechanism, as opposed to like there's no fear. Everyone who knows Bitcoin, or is into Bitcoin, understands its principles, understands where it's going, and they're just trying to get everybody else on board, and so they don't miss the boat as well, or get rug pulled.
So maybe I can jump in here for a bit, and then I need to drop. Actually, I'm in the middle of another thing. So the toxic label is actually quite old. We started seeing that during the block size wars, even pretty early on, when some of us were calling out the stupid forks, right? Like Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Unlimited, SegWit 2x. It's just like we say that's stupid, and I think if the maximalism part is if you reject things that violate common sense thinking, then the toxic part is just being willing to say it and vocalize your disdain for that stupid idea. I mean, it's always going to be used, just like maximalism is used as a slur. Like the toxic part is also a slur because they don't like winning. And the increase is probably directly related to the increase in the number of scams out there, right? Like if you've been in the space for any number of years, you've seen all these things come and go, like all these projects. There's going to be a new one, like well, not anymore, but I don't think Solana's that hot anymore, but it was the hot thing. There's going to be another one in a year, right? And we're going to say, well, you don't need the blockchain for that. It doesn't need to exist. It's kind of pointless. And then someone on the other side that's invested in that project is going to call you toxic. So it's not something you're going to ever escape unless you are suddenly nice to everyone. And in that case, you're enabling the scams, right? So the only other way is like if someone says, I have a stupid idea and it does this on a blockchain, if you're not toxic, you'll go, oh, well, that's really nice. Good luck. But I don't see any value in doing that. And it doesn't help protect people from being scammed too, right? So I just don't think it's going to go away. These are just ways for people to attack Bitcoiners at the end of the day. And that's not going to change so long as we are willing to speak our minds.
Hate is gonna hate, man. Hate is gonna hate.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, thanks, guys.
Samson, thanks so much for joining and sharing your perspective. I don't want to hold you up, but just on a little plug for Samson, he was one of the first people that I personally I've seen advertise and make available toxic maximalist merchandise. So check out Sam's store, and I think some of that UASF and gear might still be there in the toxic maximalist. The maximalist house, that was a classic. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care. Have fun.
Thank you. All right, so I mean, on this topic of toxicity, just to keep the conversation going, I think one we have to realize, like, this term toxic, it has a bad connotation. But if you think about just in biology, our immune systems are toxic to toxins. Right? We're toxic to microbes that don't belong there. The idea of toxicity is really in the eye of the beholder. You want your body to be toxic to bacteria and viruses and the like, because it doesn't belong there and it can kill you. And so toxicity in that term, in that way, is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I think it's a big reason. Right? I think there's a way to be toxic and constructive, like, let's say our immune reactions are. And then there is the completely off the wall, completely insane personal attacks and the like version of toxicity, which I think can push people away. But as long as we're able to be constructively toxic to the idea, not necessarily toxic to the person, unless they're scared, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, sorry. I think this is a good time to bring up something important about toxicity that might leave untouched. There is a difference, like you said, between a healthy toxicity and immune system and like what I can only call bullying. There are some people that use the Bitcoin flag to run around Twitter all day bullying people, making fun of somebody for their whatever political beliefs or whatever other beliefs they have. And that stuff, I think, is like, it's not a very huge portion of people that care about Bitcoin, but it's a loud portion of people that care about Bitcoin. And I think that gives us a lot of that quote unquote like maxi hate. It comes from these guys that are just internet trolls. They're just, want to call everybody ugly or whatever it is they do online all day, but now they do it with Bitcoin in their bio.
It's not our jobs to like police Twitter, though.
Absolutely, it's not. And that's why, somebody has told me before or made a general criticism of quote unquote maximalists, saying, well, then why aren't you calling out those people who, are like really, whether they're Nazi or chauvinist or whatever it is. I mean, it probably goes both ways, communists too. Why don't I spend my days calling out those people all day who identify as maximalists but say hateful, bullying things? Because that's not why I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter to like be the whatever political correct beliefs.
I just think that like there's a lot going on right now, particularly these last couple years, where there's a full-on war for reality in people's minds. And what happens is people have, over the last couple years, had one major touch point after another of this like division of reality, and people are at this point just like pushed to their limits around it. You can't police the internet. This is what's going to happen: is people are going to point out faults that have maybe nothing to do with Bitcoin, and they want to troll people because there's like absolute like war for what's true.
TC, this is what I call classic internet.
Sorry, Tony. Tomer has had his hand up for a while. I want to give him a chance to speak, and Tony, you're up next, I promise. Tomer, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt. I dropped in and I've been thinking a lot about this issue. I just shared in the Nest an article that I published about this today on Bitcoin Magazine that touches on these topics. And I think that there's a couple of things. We talk about maximalism, we talk about toxicity. There are words, and I think we get to observe it. There are words in the English language that mean the exact opposite of the same word. A word like sanction means to disallow, and it also means to give permission to. I sanction this behavior, or I impose sanctions. And it's kind of weird that these things happen. We also experience words flip-flopping in their meaning. The word liberal today means the opposite of what it used to mean. It used to mean someone who respected the liberty and rights else. And today it's imposition, and conservative is also flipped its meaning. Conservative used to mean supporting the king and the old establishment of rule, and today it means what liberal used to mean, adhering to rights. So language is very fluid and chaotic, and the word like maximalist is this incredible thing because it's a brand new word. It was invented as a slur, and people took it to mean the exact opposite. They took it with pride. So we've got this word that we're competing for its definition, and it means both something to be very proud of and something that other people are trying to shame you into. And someone made the same point about the word toxic recently. It's important that toxins are something that kill something, but they don't necessarily kill something good or something or evil. They just kill something. And Bitcoiners take on the word toxic to applaud killing something that's evil in the system, right? Rather than killing something that's good. But people from the other side say, "Hey, you're killing my coin." So I think this debate is understandable. I think people should really read Pete Rizzo's piece on maximalism, because I think he's actually, even though the word is just kind of made up and doesn't really have a definition, he's explored what the philosophy is of people who are Bitcoiners or Bitcoin only or Bitcoin maximalists, for there being a precise term to describe us. And he points out that it's a very rational philosophy. It's the only rational philosophy. Having a philosophy that says, well, Bitcoin plus 20,000 other coins is something that you should have in your life, and that you have to somehow juggle and spin the plates on 20,000 things, clearly isn't scalable to the rest of the world, right? Like, people actually have to do something with their lives, not trade their money into and out of 20,000 currencies every 10 seconds. And even you can take this to the next logical level, which ironically is an analysis that Nick Carter offered the world a couple of years ago, which is, even if you're just, well, Bitcoin plus one other, it's like, well, which one other? And why not yet? And why not Bitcoin plus two others? It's like, you either have Bitcoin only, which you can consistently hold, or there's 20,000 versions of how many Bitcoin plus one other or Bitcoin plus two others, and whichever the one other or two other or three other or four other or five others are, you end up with this infinite combinatorial explosion. So I think I think all of these things lead us to, you can very rationally, and pretty much the only rational viewpoint you can have when you distill everything is to be a person of a maximalist position. The thing that I'm floating in my story that I my opinion piece that I shared today is really about how we who identify as Bitcoin only choose to spend our time. And I think it's important that we spend our time explaining to other people and objecting to people who try to put forward theories either out of error or out of anti-scam people that are invalid. But I'm also proposing we shouldn't get too caught up in the arguments and the debates and the anger that it leads to, and then behavior of toxicity, the portion of it that gets labeled as Bitcoiners are scary, intolerant, unloving people, because we're not, we're the opposite. Right? We're very friendly, welcoming, especially when we're in the environment where we have curious listeners and other people who just want to share their enthusiasm for the incredible invention that Bitcoin is. And what I'm advocating for in there is becoming self-aware of the fact that you not only have sovereignty over your money when you become a Bitcoiner, you have sovereignty over your time and your space. Like, where are you going to spend your time, and what are you going to spend it doing? And getting caught up in debates with scammers and fighting them is not necessarily the best way for you to spend your time. I'm not even saying what's good for Bitcoin. I'm saying what's good for you, right? Where are you happy? Are you happy in rooms like this where there's lots of other Bitcoiners sharing your enthusiasm or doing things you love? Or are you happier trying to win a debate against someone who has no curiosity and no honesty about something? Aren't you simply better off spending the minimum amount of time in a room like that, saying, I'm going to be somewhere else. You guys can talk. If you guys who are genuinely curious can come and talk to me there. And then you can see what Bitcoiners are really like, rather than having someone push your buttons and saying, you see, this is what Bitcoiners are like. which is what we've had to put up with all week and longer, of course. But I think this week's been particularly a case of someone triggering one Bitcoiner here or there, or a group of Bitcoiners here and there with an inflammatory statement and saying, aha, you see, look at how angry they are after, it's like after kicking sand in your face and you get angry, they say, look at this angry person. Why are they angry? Right. So I'm just saying, I've gone on a little long here, so I'll up myself right away. But I'm just saying there's much more peaceful and happier paths to what's inevitable anyways. So act out of your own interest, and let's be happy. So that's why my article's actually called Bitcoiners, Truth, Beauty, and Love, because there's a lot of love in the community. There's a lot of beauty in Bitcoin, and there's nothing but truth in Bitcoin. And you can't.
Love that perspective. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you had written previously about Bitcoiners as truth tellers, not and maybe specifically maximalists about as truth tellers. If you want to find that article and share it.
I'll share that. I think the one, awesome. I've got a few on truth, but I think the one you're talking about is, just correct me if I'm wrong, so I'll dig out the right one. It's called Bitcoiners Are Not Toxic, They Have Integrity.
Yes, that one.
I'll dig that one up and share that to the nest as well.
Thank you. Yeah, before Tomer started speaking, sorry to quit because before Tomer started speaking, I promised East Side Tony to share his thoughts, and then Bitcoin for Kiddos, you can go next.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I wanted to talk about what TC was talking about, and then Tomer got me thinking in a million different directions. TC was we were talking about Bitcoin maximalism and how we were toxic, right? But I've been on the internet long enough to remember that this is just classic internet. You know what I mean? Like, I remember, people would try to troll you just to see if you would react. And if you didn't react, it would be just kind of cool now. And then just go along from there. Like, and whatever, I didn't make up the rules. That's just the way it was since back in the day. And it seems like now it's kind of just going back to that, right? And then talking about what Tomer was talking about, right? A little piece of that was like, when was the last time one of these shitcoiners tried to teach you something out of the pureness of their own heart and like without getting a reward back? Like, I understand, I guess, like if you get more people on the Bitcoin network, then your stash, gets inflated or whatever. But it's like I'm out here actually trying to teach people about financial literacy. I posted something up on the Nest, which is like this kid from Austin, and all he does is just go up to people and do financial audits, like live on the street. And you listen to these kids, man, and it's so depressing how fucked they are. You know what I mean? Like in their financial situation, some of these kids are like a $250,000 in debt. You know what I mean? Like literally not working. And it's just like, oh my God. So like before you even start trying to teach Bitcoin to people, you might want to see where they're at in their journey of financial literacy. And like just get to their level. You know what I mean? Like I think that's kind of like glazed over, or like people just don't think about, people think, oh yeah, they know what we know already. But it's like, no, dude, like actually try to understand where they're coming from, because they might not have any footing on the financial literacy side of things, And that's where you start.
I just want to like highlight, because Tony, I completely agree with you. Like, I was speaking a little bit to the fact that there's all kinds of shenanigans on the internet. And there are trolls on the internet, and that's just something you're gonna encounter. But I'm like almost more speaking to the fact that like Bitcoiners are intolerant. We're intolerant of fiat and scams and lying and deception and rent seeking and preying on uninformed people and misrepresentation. And I could go on and on and on, but it's like the whole fiat mindset, the fiat framework that the world operates on. And if you are intolerant of any of those things, let alone all of them, you're going to run into all kinds of shit that's outside of Bitcoin. You're going to run into shit that's like competing cryptos, or maybe it's just the world at large and all these other major waves of different issues that sweep through, where you find the same damn pattern over and over again, where there's just such deception and duality. Now, when we encounter people on the internet that kind of follow those tendencies, I think there's a natural reaction that occurs. And I think that's actually a good thing. And I think that's to be expected. And I think if somebody comes out and tries to walk this fine line where they're trying to rationalize this deception, taking advantage of people, scamming, all this kind of stuff, you're going predictably to get an intolerant reaction from people who are intolerant to those things. And I think that we shouldn't be like embarrassed of that. We shouldn't shy away from it. We shouldn't make excuses for it. I think that is one of the things all know when you're in Bitcoin long enough and you dive down the rabbit hole deep enough. It goes far beyond what asset you're holding or how you save your money. It starts affecting other parts of your life because you are seeking truth and you are intolerant of bullshit.
Yeah, TC, awesome, man. Thank you for your input on that. I think most of us on this call, at least, would definitely agree with that. Coin for Kiddos, you had something to say. I interrupted you a couple of times. Please feel free to share your thoughts.
Yeah, no problem. This conversation's been awesome. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about being in Bitcoin since early 2017 and is just researching the adoption of the types of people that are starting to come into this space. Early on, it was all the technical and coders who like to get their hands wet and play around with the technology and see what it can do. And then after that, it was those closest to the technologists that had conversations and started learning about financial literacy and all the benefits that Bitcoin could one day have, even though it didn't have any monetary value at that particular time. And then once the pizza day happened, then all of a sudden the speculators come into the space and start trading the coin, and the starts really coming to life and really not really coming into itself yet, but becoming more aware by more people. And, now we're at the stage where the common man is starting to understand or at least hear about Bitcoin. Even a year and a half ago, you could still have a lot of conversations with people and they didn't know what Bitcoin was. And yet here we are today, and Bitcoin is a brand that's known throughout the world. And even though people aren't necessarily all buying it, they're all aware of it and they're all paying attention to it now. And it's just exciting to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years as all of these Bitcoin only companies like Coinbits and Swan and what Samson's doing and Blockstream and Unchained, all these companies that are building these technological financial infrastructures that are going to allow more financial institutions to come into this space and really open up the floodgates to this technology. And it's one of those things that had never happened soon enough. But much like the internet, the infrastructure had to be built first before all of that stuff, all that really is able to take place in a meaningful way. And so to watch this technology expand and grow, and to watch the education and to watch the dialogue, I think of this group here kind of much like the Greeks and the ancient philosophers must have just sat around and just hashed out ideas and come up with new concepts and try to find ways to progress humanity. And I feel like that's where we are at in this adoption curve right now. And it's just really cool to listen and learn and help educate and meet new people.
For sure. Hey, we've had a couple of people join us and stay quiet for a while on the speaker board here. We've got Tone Vase, who was probably one of the first people to get called Bitcoin toxic maximalist, and D++. How are you guys? Welcome. Thank you for being so patient to share your thoughts here. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin maximalism toxicity? Is toxicity good? Is Bitcoin maximalism good? Is there a bad version of toxicity? Do people take it too far? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was enjoying hearing what Samson had to say. And I agree that I think maximalism is a good thing. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm Bitcoin only. And whenever I ask people who push back against maximalism what it is that they're interested in outside of Bitcoin, they either just dodge the question completely, or they can't answer it, or they say something like Ethereum, which I don't really think has any merit, given that it's a 70% pre-mined thing that I don't think even knows what it is. It's a solution looking for a problem and quite broken. And I can't get an answer out of anybody. I asked Nick Carter, he brought me up when he was doing his room about maximalists or whatever, asked him what he was interested in outside of Bitcoin, and it kind of boiled down to Ethereum. And there's a lot of VC money going into Web3 projects, a lot. and it's easy to raise money. It's easy to build some kind of token that nobody needs, some kind of project that nobody needs that has no purpose. For some reason, people are throwing money at those projects. I don't understand why. It's harder to build on Bitcoin. It's hard to raise money to build on Bitcoin. It's hard to get paid in the Bitcoin space. There are some Bitcoin only jobs, of course, but you can't extract value from anybody. You have to really work, and making money is hard, man. Like, you have to really work really hard and provide some kind of service of very high quality, very, very high value to get somebody to part with their Bitcoin to pay for it. Bitcoiners don't like spending their Bitcoin. You have to give them something that they want more than having their Bitcoin. That's extraordinarily hard, especially given that I think Bitcoin has the ability to do a 100, 200, 300, 400, 500x from here. That makes it harder, even harder to get people to spend their Bitcoin. And that's fine, because I don't feel entitled to people's Bitcoin. I don't feel entitled to take people's money. And I think for that reason, I get a lot of messages every day of people saying they want to work in Bitcoin, which is awesome. And of course, I would encourage that. But what I also say is, what about the career that you already have? Like, maybe don't quit your day job. Maybe continue mining fiat. Continue with whatever it is that you've developed your expertise in, which you may have been working on for 10 or more years, maybe 20 or more years, maybe 30 or more years. Everybody has something beautiful to offer. You don't have to like quit your day job and try and get a job coding. There's no reason to do that. So I just think that, like, mine fiat and you'll be way less likely to get swept up in all of this A16Z Web3 bullshit. And then you won't be tempted to shitcoin.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's easy to get somebody to give you money from a product that can just be, wished into reality, worth versus Bitcoin that has to be worked into reality. And then, like you said, D++, you have to prove your worth on why you deserve to have the Bitcoin, because we all understand the value that Bitcoin, the true intrinsic value of Bitcoin versus, say, Ethereum. We've been programmed into this debt-based economy where money can be printed into reality and then just distributed at will based on a person's feelings, versus having to actually create value to bring it into the world and then to move it around the system and to give it to others. So yeah, value is very important.
Maher, you got your hand raised. You want to come up here?
Yeah. I just wanted to second what D++ was saying about sort of the VC industry and sort of building companies that way, and the amount of money that's just so easy to get. Because if you think about it, what you're trying to do when you're raising money is you're trying to impress a person across the table. But when you're trying to build a business, you're trying to create value for the market. That's a lot harder to do. And to your point, it's making money is hard. And I remember when we started Coinbits like a couple of years ago, we made a conscious decision not to raise money, that we were going to either bootstrap this thing, get some help from some friends and family, and really focus on Coinbits being like an employee-owned business, so that the people who are sacrificing and building are the ones benefiting from the effort, or the proof of work, so to speak, that you're putting into it. So it's you're right. You may sacrifice on pace and speed and maybe it might even be timing, and it might even be like a poor business decision. But in the end, when you look yourself in the mirror, you realize like, hey, like this is something that we're building from the sweat equity that we're putting into the company. It's very core and fundamental and aligned with what we believe the Bitcoin ethos is about as well.
No, very good points. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. You've been up here and haven't had a chance to speak yet. The quote-unquote toxic maximalist stuff from, I guess, back in the day in 2017, the block size wars. What are your thoughts on this topic? I'm sure you've been called out many times.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting topic. Now, the word toxic is very new, mostly because, I was there when the word maximalist came into existence. If you Google like top 10 Bitcoin maximalists, you'll probably find me on those lists from 2017, 18, 19. And I like to call myself more of a shitcoin minimalist, which is the same exact thing. And I don't. I even have hats that say shitcoin minimalist, but in general, the word toxic's new. So the toxic stuff's new, and it happened because Bitcoiners just embraced the word maximalist. It's the Streisand effect. I mean, you can do about it. I have a different view on it now. I just care a lot less. It's anyone that says, well, the Bitcoin needs to be friendlier, but there's no such thing as Bitcoin, right? It's like being an internet maximalist. It's just these concepts, they make no sense to me. Some people could be more aggressive than others. I personally don't like being aggressive to those who I know don't know better. So also I'm not, so here's how I do it basically. I'm aggressive to people who I know are scamming and they know what they're doing. An example of that would be a Richard Hart. Okay. Obviously he understands this field and he's an outright scammer. So you can be as, aggressive as you like somebody like Craig Wright. Now, I'm not that aggressive against these people anymore, mostly because they're now billionaires, because 90% of crypto is afraid to open their mouth and be critical of anything. Everyone just wants to be friends. And then you get sued like Hodlnut or McCormick. So I just don't bother anymore because I just don't have time nor the money for that shit. And when it comes to people that just, don't know better, I'm not aggressive towards them. It's just the way it is, So I just let it go. Also, I'm not as aggressive to guys like Nick Carter and some of the others. I mean, Eric Wall's still a pain in the ass, but because I value how much good they've done for Bitcoin, and then, I'm very lenient. I was even lenient with Roger Ver for years. The more good you've done in Bitcoin, the more of a rope I'm giving you to admit you messed up. Even Trace Mayer, I still don't have a problem with, but he's gone. It was right after he was promoting Wimble coin, and he's done a lot of good for the space. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, I understand Bitcoin. I understand why Bitcoin's going to win. And all this nonsense with shitcoins, Ethereum included, is just slowing it down. And I 100% agree with you, D, that it is so difficult to build on Bitcoin. And I've said this many times. I had to try to find a reason as to why a liquid sidechain is just not popular. And the only explanation I have for that is no one is really incentivized to promote liquid sidechain because an Bitcoiner is not going to make our Bitcoins go up in value. But an additional Dogecoiner probably might, right? Because it's just a low cap market coin. But more importantly, if you build a project on a liquid, whether it's an NFT project, whether it's a token, whatever it is, your pool of smart investors is Bitcoiners versus a pool of gullible investors being Ethereum. When you build your NFTs on top of Ethereum, your entire pool of potential suckers are Ethereum people, and they have already admitted that they don't know what they're doing. They've already admitted they'll invest in anything and everything. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be in Ethereum. And that is why it's almost impossible to build on top of Bitcoin and promote it. It will get there. If you have a worthwhile project, you'll have to put it on Bitcoin. But also, this is also why Tether is not very popular on Bitcoin. Because if you're a Bitcoiner, you don't really need Tether. If you're a Bitcoiner, you trust Bitcoin and you're willing to hold a decent stash through the ups and downs and use it when you have to. But if you're a shitcoiner, you need the stable dollar. So this is why, Tether on Liquid is not as popular as Tether on Ethereum and Tether on Tron. Because people that use that, that stable token, they're not Bitcoiners. Because if they were Bitcoiners, they'd be in Bitcoin. And it's just a challenge. I mean, the space will overcome it.
Yeah, no, don't there's so much there that you've said that resonates with probably so many of us. And, it almost feels like to what you were saying, the step after Bitcoin toxic maximalism is Bitcoin What will be the term, like Bitcoin vacationism, where you're like the world around you. It's that meme of the dog that's like in a building room behind because you've got Bitcoin. And you care less and less as time goes on about this other nonsense. It kind of tends to self-resolve.
Shitcoin indifference.
Perfect. That's perfect. Awesome. This has been such an awesome conversation. There is nothing better than discussing things like this with other Bitcoiners because the proof of work is there, right? Like nobody that has been up here on the stage has said anything that isn't thought through, that isn't from, clearly you've spent hours learning, understanding what money is, understanding the impact of Bitcoin to the world. And once you do that, it becomes very difficult to want to spend time peddling anything else. There's always the temptation, like Dee said, like Tone said, like Samson said before, it's the fiat problem, right? So what Saifedean talks about in the Bitcoin standard. Everybody wants to be the money printer. Everybody wants to access the labor of others at a lower cost. And so that temptation is always there. And unless you really work and you really provide value, that stuff just doesn't fly with Bitcoiners. And that's where the toxicity comes from. It's like, especially like Tone said, especially with the people that know better, people that know what they're doing, the people who are just duping others into giving them basically their labor for free. And that's where the toxicity comes in. And I think that's the good use of toxicity. Of course, some people take that too far and it can get out of control, but you can't control that. But that's not to say that toxicity is bad. Toxicity is a good thing. It's what keeps many people, I think. East Side Tony, who was up here earlier, for those who have joined later, was describing the financial situation of people that are younger and going through life for the first time, or people who are, sure everybody here knows someone who's going to try to buy their first home or something like that, and they're just completely priced out. So without toxicity to nonsense, those people don't stand a chance. They might lose whatever chance they've slowly built up for themselves. So it's a crucial thing to do right, so that we don't turn people away. Because the flip side of this, and this is the side that we haven't talked about, which I hope can get some opinions here from the speakers on, is can we, there's a downside, is those fringe people that take it too far, that get insulting, or as Tony called it, aggressive. Can that push people away? Is that really a risk? Like, do we, in the process of being toxic to bad ideas, bad actors, do we push people away? And could that be a risk? And if that's the risk, how do we mitigate it? What are the thoughts of the group on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw one last thought out there. Like, also, I can definitely see toxicity coming. Like, I'm just tired of explaining the same shit over and over and over. And that's why I'm almost ready to be done. I mean, I've been doing it probably longer than anyone else I see in this spaces. And I'm just tired of it. Like, I'm done. And I'm going to start focusing on other stuff. I'm not going to start focusing on Ethereum or anything like that. But I'm just tired of explaining it. And I'm going to focus on my conferences. I'm going to focus on more finance, more trading stuff. And this is why I have all those videos. And if someone asks me, like, people still ask me, Tone, I mean, like, why is Monero a shitcoin? Well, this is why I have a 1-hour video. And I love it. Or like, hey, why is Ethereum? Why do you think Ethereum is scammy? I'm like, well, here, watch these 3 episodes of the crypto scam. And if the answer is, well, that's too long, can you just explain that? I say, then you don't really want to know why Ethereum is just outright garbage. And I mean, I have videos on everything over the years. And yeah, I mean, like, some of my favorite people are the ones that like came from being shitcoiners and then they realized that it's Bitcoin. Someone just tried to, talk, I think it was Eric Wall again. Eric Wall like put out that video showing like Corey Klippstein promoting some projects back in the day before he became like our biggest Bitcoin maxi now. And I'm perfectly okay with it. I'm happy about that. Max Kaiser did a full 180. He was all Bitcoin, and then he started dabbling into shit coins, and then he came back to become like, again, a full Bitcoiner. I mean, you understand. And I was watching that video of Corey. I'm like, oh man, Corey, if only you were watching me back in the day. I'm like, I had a whole episode about, hash graphs and what a ridiculous project that was. It's just, I mean, it's fine. And it's just, it's just the world we will have to live with. And I'm getting more, I guess, at peace with this world, because I do think that the world is trending towards 100,000 tokens. I think that's where the world's going. I don't think it's a good thing, but I think that's going to happen. The SEC is not stopping this, and there is a high probability there will be no SEC in the future. So there will be a regulatory body to stop it. And what that means is we're talking about, I mean, this could be a good thing, could be a lot of people think it's a good thing. Some people think it's not a good thing. I can argue both sides. I usually argue that it's, I usually argue for the SEC because I usually have Giacomo on my show and he hates the SEC. So I take that side. But I could also argue the other side as well. In that, if the SEC fails as a governing body of securities, then why would any company ever go public on the stock market, whether it's NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange? Like, if the SEC fails in labeling, say, at least 10,000 of these tokens as securities, then why on earth would any company ever not do the token first and then maybe build the company later? That will literally become the business model of every single company, from building shoes to whatever, to anything. I don't think that's I personally don't think that's good, but it may be a world we will all have to adjust to. And maybe if it's built on Bitcoin, Bitcoin becomes the self-regulating body where you have to separate a Bitcoiner from his Bitcoin in order to get into your token. And that is going to be so much harder to do. So maybe there's a silver lining there, but I think the world's going to significantly change.
For sure. It's tough to imagine a world without the SEC. It's wild. It's wild.
Is Tone saying that we could exchange for Bitcoin? Because that's like the best trade of all time.
It'd be nice if that happened. I mean, it's borderline possible, but yeah, I mean, in my political view is, I've been saying it all the time, and like with this Trump thing of like 100 FBI agents at his house, I mean, it's just speeding everything up. I still think the US will split. And if it does, what happens to all of these global regulators? I think they're done. And in today's digital age, I don't see how anyone could, after the United States, I don't see how anyone could be a global police will be able to do it. They're trying with their credit score system, but I don't think the Chinese will be able to, get that system on Americans. Like, I don't see that happening. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting world.
Yeah, Phil.
Leonardo, go ahead.
We've got like 100 million, like 100 years where like people have been taken care of, their money's been taken care of. It's like they've been babied, and now they're going to have to grow up. And it's like there is no choice because they just can't be taken care of anymore in that sense. And so everybody's going to have to learn to be sovereign. It's like we got this fountainhead that was built, and it's like a geyser, that provides all the water that anybody's ever going to need. But you just have to work. You have to walk up and get the water that comes out every 10 minutes and walk back. And it's like you can have all these shit coins that are like, oh, we're going to build pipes to take them to your house because you're lazy or whatever. And then you end up with like situations like Flint, Michigan. And it's like, just up to the geyser, man. It's like everyone's going to have to learn to do that. And it's like, it's going to hurt for some people, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah, there's no escaping the world where you have to create value on a Bitcoin standard. That's what Bitcoin forces. It forces truth in what you say, truth in what you stand for, truth in the value that you produce. That is the only way that Bitcoin is a Bitcoin standard, and that's what Bitcoin is optimizing for. If you look at the self-selection that Bitcoin has done, I forget who first came up with this term. Bitcoin selects for people who seek truth. And because of that, the people that do seek truth wholeheartedly are looking for it. They won't substitute. There's no second best, as Sailor says. They won't substitute anything else for that. And that's in all walks of life. That's in what people say, what people consume, and what they produce. and it carries over. It becomes an ethos. It becomes something to live by. And Ben's all in on that. On this topic though, that I kind of started to allude to, and we haven't. I don't know. I think the jury's still out on this. I think the question is, it's clear what the benefits are of Bitcoin maximalism, coin minimalism, as Toad calls it. Is there a disadvantage? Do we potentially push it away? I mean, altcoins do this all the time. It slows down the adoption of Bitcoin. It makes it take longer for people to see the light with Bitcoin. Do we, being toxic specifically, potentially push people away from realizing sooner because of some of the toxicity of some people? Controversial topic. I'm wondering what people's thoughts are. Bitcoin for kids. Kick us off on
Well, since nobody else jumped in, I'll just say no. Definitely not.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Bitcoin does not doesn't give a fuck. Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin is not a group of people on Twitter. It's money for the world. And at this point, it's years past the point where it could be really slowed down or stopped. It is absolutely unstoppable. And it really does not matter what any of us say. We need it more than it needs us. It is completely anti-fragile and resilient. And I have confidence that Bitcoin maxis can continue being Bitcoin maxis, and it's not going to affect the outcome.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think, Bitcoin doesn't need any one of us in particular. At the end of the day, we're all just educators. And if we were to just fall off the face of the planet and nobody were to ever hear from us again, Bitcoin would keep going and its adoption would keep going, because the message that it sends of freedom and self-sovereignty, and again, underscore freedom and self-sovereignty, that message is something that can't be silenced.
For sure. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground in tonight's conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. We've been going for an hour and a half, and we're having a conversation going. But for those who are just joining, we're covering the topic of maximalism. We're covering the topic of, is it good? Is it bad? What is it? And this conversation, for those who joined later, is all recorded. We'll post it up on our Twitter handle after. Just a quick plug for Coinbits and who we are. We are a Bitcoin financial services company. We've got a couple of awesome Bitcoin products. We allow you to DCA, and we built, we think, one of the best, if not the best, coin DCA products out there. Check us out, coinbits.app. On a lighter note here with Bitcoin maximalism, there are a lot of interesting takes. I think Tone had mentioned he's tired of it, and I think Tone, pass the baton on, man. Like, you explained things so many times, and I can imagine explaining things over and over is not a whole bunch of fun. So pass the baton on and let somebody else do that explaining, and you focus your energy somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing else with moving on to other things. As in the famous words of Satoshi, you built the value that you could, and thanks to technology, people are able to hear your takes and listen to that and learn from you if that's the case. And you've done well. But I wonder if, something we held a space last week about meme culture, and a lot of times we can, bring ideas down into their simplest form, into their most information dense form by memeing it. And, in a way, Bitcoin maximalism is a meme, isn't it? It was something that, as we discussed earlier, Vitalik used as an insult to the Bitcoin maximalists, and now we wear it as a badge of honor. Is there an interesting crossover there between maximalism and meme culture? Tone, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you're much familiar, Tone.
Look, I'm not. I'm not. I don't really do memes. I think it's pretty cool. I'm okay with it. Like, I don't understand how, like, everything. I've seen presentations on the meme culture. I'm okay with it. It's not my thing, but I'm not a hater of it. It's fine. It's a way to get a message across. I hope it's helping. Well, we will see. We will see. I'm totally impartial meme culture. I'm fine with it.
Everything is good for Bitcoin. I think the advantages maybe for kind of the passerby, the crypto tourists, where they see this hilarious group. And by the way, nobody memes like Bitcoin maximalists, right? There is no other group of people, red pilled, orange pilled, white pilled. There is no better group of people at memeing than the Bitcoin maxi, because we perfected it. It's an art. Bitstein, I think, has a lot to do with that. And anyway, so the idea is, if you are a crypto tourist and you're just kind of watching the space from afar, we're able to so easily in such an attention deprived world get points across that justify and make the case for Bitcoin maximalism better than anything else. Like, if you have 10 seconds to get a point across about why Bitcoin, why not anything else, the term shitcoin is in fact a meme, right? Because it decompresses everything into what that is. And it made it into the floor of Congress. And I think it was Warren Davidson, I want to say in 2020 or maybe 2021, that used the term shitcoin. So I think his verbatim was, there's Bitcoin and then there's shitcoin, on record in the in Congress. And that's the power of memes. Ultimately it's a meme, and I think there's an interesting dynamic there, and it's something to share information very quickly. Also, any additional thoughts from any of the speakers here? I see a couple of new requests here for speaking. Matt C, I'm adding you. Feel free to share your thoughts. But any additional thoughts on Bitcoin maximalism? Matt, did you have something to say, or I just added you?
Oh, sorry. I must have missed part of that. I just hopped in. Yeah, I was still connecting.
Yeah, did you have something to say or add?
Sure. I heard the earlier point that I was making. I think you just gotta. Everyone responds to a message in their own way, whether you're talking different generations or societies or culture. So there's huge swaths of people who appreciate and love and respond to memes, and there's others who prefer give me the 28 thread takedown of some token or shit coin. Others they want a medium post, like however you need to get a message across. There's nothing wrong with meeting people where they are.
Definitely, it's just another medium. Tony, did I cut you off?
I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Okay, Bitcoin for Katos, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, pictures say 1,000 words, as the saying goes. And on a platform like Twitter, where your thought has to be truncated to a very small amount of characters, I think the meme is a great way to express an opinion and a philosophy and a thought in a visual way that's more memorable to a larger group of people. As we all know, there's two different ways of learning. You can either learn through pictures or you can learn through reading, but the best way to learn is through pictures and reading at the same time. And the meme kind of encompasses that ability in a very precise way.
Yeah, no, for sure. Awesome. Guys, this was an awesome conversation. Talking with Bitcoin maximalists about Bitcoin maximalism is an awesome experience. We'd love to have you guys as regular participants. Check out Coinbits.app, the best way to orange pill your friends and family, because it gets you to get some Bitcoin exposure without feeling like you're investing in it. Check it out, Coinbits.app. We'd love to have you guys regularly join us as kind of a pleb hangout as we head into Friday and kick off the weekend. So we'd love to have you join us regularly. Is anybody on the speaker board to have any last thoughts before we?
Yeah, thanks everybody. And just one last thought on the meme thing. We talked about this a little on the original spaces. I think the memes are powerful in the sense of they mock the institutions who don't want to be mocked and who kind of about face, and fiat relies on that kind of facade and this masking, so to speak, that we have to respect these people who constantly debase our currency, rely on this kind of theft. And I think like the Jerome Powell Burr, money go Burr, or printer go Burr meme, like it's so quick, so powerful, so funny. And I think that's why it gets the message across, and it really kind of unmasks the uncertainty there. So I love that space tonight, guys. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and I would love to see you next week. Have a good night, everybody.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Bitcoin Roundup podcast presented by Coinbits. So what do you think of the conversation? Share your thoughts with us on Twitter @CoinbitsApp, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of our next episode release. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Bitcoin Roundup podcast.